Hey everyone, pull up a pillow, dim the lights, maybe pour yourself something warm, preferably not the medieval boiled wine we're talking about tonight, and let's glide straight into the dusty lists where armored titans try to turn each other into scrap metal for honor, applause, and the occasional head nod from a lady in the stands. Before we let the lances fly, do me a tiny favor. Tap that like button if you enjoyed drifting off to the less glamorous corners of history, and drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and how late you're staying up. I love knowing which time zones we're collectively dozing in. Now, settle in, because tonight we're stalking the sidelines of the jousting field. The mud, the splinters, and the very squishy medical aftermath, when the best cure for a shattered collarbone was, apparently, a bucket of wine simmered over a smoky brazier. But don't drift off yet. Our tournament day is just beginning, and the injuries escalate with the sun. By noon, heat turns the tilt yard into a frying pan. Knights bake in steel shells, sweat pooling under gambesons. Dehydration makes hands shake, and shaky hands miss targets. Missed targets mean glancing blows that skip off armor and find gaps. Armpits, necks, the soft spot just above the hip. Blood leaks in dark rivulets, disappearing into chainmail. You and the surgeon run triage like frantic beekeepers, swatting away buzzing flies while seeping wounds demand attention. Some injuries are theatrical. A lance shard penetrates a pauldron's joint, leaving a splinter more impressive than lethal. Others, silent but dire. A slow bleed inside the skull, invisible until the knight slurs words and collapses hours later. Every so often, someone suggests another remedy: honey poultices, ground comfrey, or crushed emeralds if the patient is royal and superstitious. Yet boiled wine stays the star of the show. It scalds, cleans, and, bonus, makes everyone tipsier, patient and staff alike. If the pain is too much, the surgeon hands the knight a leather flask. "Drink deeply first, my lord, then I'll pour the rest on your shoulder." This is the medieval equivalent of "take two and call me in the morning," except there is no morning call. Only hope the wound doesn't suppurate into a pus volcano. Imagine the smell of that infirmary. Iron from blood, leather sweat, singed wool bandages, and an ever-present waft of vino steaming in the pot. It turns the air sticky and sweet, like a tavern set on low boil. The heat curls parchment labels on jars of dried herbs, cracks candle wax, and keeps you half delirious. Each fresh patient arrives trailing dust and cheers from the arena, but inside the tent, the only soundtrack is moaning, clinking cups, and the occasional prayer. You mop a brow, knot a sling, and learn firsthand that bravery often dissolves the moment the helmet comes off. Knights cry like children when the bone saw appears, not for amputation, that's rare in jousting, but to shave away a fragment stuck near an elbow joint. Boiled wine preps the blade. No one trusts water, because water is for fish and fevers. Outside, the herald announces the next pairing, and you can tell by the crowd's roar that it's the tourney favorite, a baron with a crest of crimson eagles. You've already seen his opponent earlier, nervously fastening straps, muttering about the strength of his new ashwood lance. They thunder at each other, hooves sculpting divots as if giants drummed the earth. A splintering crash. One rider wheels, the other somersaults over a horse's neck, hits the ground in a spray of dust. You duck as someone flings open the tent flap, yelling for help. Another customer. He's breathing, but his arm is a disaster. The steel vambrace is dented inward like a tin cup stepped on by an ox. Removing armor is its own grisly art. Pry leather ties, don't cut them,
They cost money. Slide metal off while bone grinds. Ignore the scream. Once the limb is bare, you see skin swelling like dough. The surgeon beckons. Wine. You fetch the pot, careful not to spill. Steam curls over torn muscle. The knight trembles. His breath smells of garlic and fear. The liquid hits tissue with a hiss. He bucks, curses, then sags against you. Somewhere in your mind you wonder, does boiled wine actually help? Or is this elaborate theater designed to convince infection it's not invited?
And infection is the real villain here. The medieval world feared it the way we fear sharks, mostly unseen, always hungry. A tiny splinter left inside could bloom into feverish rot by week's end. Surgeons relied on heat and alcohol because they lacked microscopes. They watched color and smell. If the wine rinse ran clear, good. If cloudy or foul-smelling, prepare for leeches or cautery irons. Sometimes they mixed vinegar into the wine, doubling the sting but upping the chances. You learn to recognize the look in the surgeon's eyes when he thinks an arm might need partial removal. He glances at your belt for the linen tourniquet. You silently beg every saint you know that today won't be the day you hold someone down for a crude excision. But not all injuries are heroic. Some are slapstick. A knight slips in manure, sprains an ankle, and insists it's broken, until the surgeon wiggles the joint and declares him dramatic. More wine, but this time it's swallowed leisurely while the surgeon wraps a compress of boiled wine-soaked cloth. Because if you can't drink your cure, wear it. The patient limps away humbled, promising to donate to the local chapel for protection against both enemies and slippery terrain. As evening bleeds orange across the lists, the final rounds bring exhausted horses and riders who've already sustained micro-fractures they don't feel yet. The lances feel heavier, arms slower, and hits more brutal. One spectacular collision snaps both shafts. Splinters pepper the gallery like wooden hail. You glimpse a princess shielding her face with a silk kerchief while her ladies squeal. Two knights slump in the dust, groaning. The sun dips, but your night shift is just warming up. Boiled wine knows no curfew. After the last fanfare, squires haul their battered lords toward the infirmary like sacks of turnips. You stoke embers under the iron pot. Wine simmers anew, crimson turning brown at the edges. Torches sputter, casting everything in a flickering hellscape. The surgeon hums a hymn off-key while poking at a cartilage flap on someone's nose. It had folded sideways in an earlier bout. Now he reheats a steel needle in wine, threads catgut, and stitches under torchlight. No anesthetic, only the patient's clenched teeth and the pot's fragrant fumes. By midnight, you've rinsed so many wounds, the ground beneath the table is a sticky puddle of wine, sweat, and diluted blood. You're numb, but you've developed a rhythm. Pour, press, wrap. Pour, press, wrap. A knight thanks you by slipping a silver penny into your palm. Another vomits on your boots. Both are normal. Occasionally, the surgeon lets you taste the wine. Quality control, he jokes, so you swallow a sip, dry, spicy, laced with iron. It steadies your hands, or maybe just dulls your own senses enough to forget that tomorrow you'll do this all over again. Just when you think the night's quieting, a messenger arrives breathless. One more casualty. A noble who tried unsaddling after 2 mugs of actual drinking wine and missed the ground entirely. Concussion, they think. You fetch a lamp, follow the messenger through tents littered with snoring men and discarded halberds. The noble lies pale, eyes rolling. The surgeon checks pupils, sniffs his breath, sighs. There's little he can do for brain rattle except rest, prayers, and, naturally, a cloth steeped in warm wine laid across the head. You hold it in place and wonder if the heat seeps through helm dent impressions to soothe the inflammation, or simply adds comfort because it smells like tomorrow's hangover cure. At last, dawn. Birds begin gossiping in the hedges. The till yard looks like a battlefield where timber exploded. You stumble outside, inhaling cool air that doesn't reek of tannins. The surgeon claps your shoulder, mutters that you did good work, and hands you the half-empty wineskin as wages. Your cousin wasn't lying. Payment, though mostly liquid. You laugh, sip, and taste a ghost of rosemary and blood. Someone rings a bell for morning mass. Somewhere else, a knight groans, realizing his arm is splinted and he missed the feast. You trudge toward a patch of straw to grab an hour's sleep before the next day's festivities. So, you wipe the last crust of dried wine and blood slurry from your fingers, crack your aching knuckles, and discover the tilt yard has already reawakened. Dawn is pink, the cook fires are blue, and somebody's rooster is auditioning for martyrdom. No breakfast for you yet. Another groan seeps through the canvas. A newly delivered noble is swearing that his mere bruise has grown teeth overnight. You slip back inside the infirmary tent, nudging aside straw littered with snapped lance tips and discarded arming caps, and there he is. One cheek ballooned purple, eye sealed shut, shoulder bruising like ripening plums. First order of business? Warm more wine. The brazier's embers sulk, so you fan them with a dented buckler and mutter unprintable prayers until sparks catch. The surgeon, eyes red, beard sticky, hands you a bundle of rue and thyme. He claims the herbs sweeten the steam, but you both know it's wishful thinking. Into the pot they go, sizzling gently, releasing a scent halfway between mulled cider and scorched hedgerow. The patient tries to sit, regrets it, and slumps back while you ladle the aromatic brew over a linen compress. Heat, alcohol, and aromatic oils, the holy trifecta of medieval sports medicine. Outside, squires clang at the blacksmith stall, pleading for miracle repairs. Inside, you tackle the noble's swelling. No ice in July, so the fix is alternating hot wine soaks, draws blood to the surface, followed by cold river stones kept in a bucket beneath the table. Place the stone, remove when numb, repeat. The noble whimpers, but you distract him with gossip. Which lord's charger threw a shoe? Which lady fainted at the sight of a compound fracture? Which herald mispronounced a name and narrowly avoided throttling? Pain blurs into curiosity. The stones stay on longer. The swelling eases. Congratulations! You've just performed medieval contrast therapy. Next patient arrives on a stretcher. Shattered collarbone, suspected lung bruise, reeking of stale ale. The surgeon saws away the gambeson, reveals blotches black and crimson. He palpates, listens for the dreaded rattle of a punctured lung. None yet. Good. Set the bone? Impossible. Too many fragments. Instead, a clever wrap with wine-soaked bandages cross-binding torso and upper arm, immobilizing the shoulder. The brew dribbles onto the floorboards. You mop reflexively, noticing how the wine stains look like rose petals on rough pine. By midday, the tent resembles a tavern caught in a livestock stampede.
Your tunic shines with dried burgundy. Flies feast on gauze tossed into buckets. You swat absent-mindedly, ears ringing with conflicting advice. Some from the surgeon, some from any passing friar who pokes his head in with a vial of holy water. The surgeon will humor them, sprinkle a drop, then drown the sight with more steaming claret. Spiritual insurance plus practical scalding, all in one pass.
Now comes infection watch. You make rounds, nose first. A wound that smelled merely like iron yesterday can morph into the unmistakable stench of rot by sunset. Each night receives the sniff test. If the aroma shifts towards sour cheese, you know bacteria, though you don't know what bacteria are, have breached the castle walls of flesh. Response? Increase the wine's acidity. Add vinegar. Double the herbs. If that fails, cautery. A red-hot iron kissed by boiled wine before pressing to flesh. Sizzle, smoke, prayer. You hold the knight's good arm, feel every muscle convulse. When it's done, the surgeon marks the patient's forehead with charred rosemary ash. Half blessing, half record-keeping, because parchment charts still smear with blood. Evening brings a lull. You sneak outside, flop on a hay bale beside a half-sleeping warhorse. The breeze carries 1,000 scents, roast beef, armor grease, field latrines, but the only one that lingers in your nostrils is heated Cabernet. You close your eyes, hear minstrels tuning lyres for tonight's feast. Inside the tent, the surgeon rehangs fresh linen, douses the floorboards with leftover wine, cheapest disinfectant available, and mutters that tomorrow's finals will be worse. He's right. Championship day means harder hits, riskier flourishes. Knights swap heavier lances with blunted coronals for lighter, sharper tips seeking points. The stands are packed, the tension hums louder than the trumpets. You stand by the rail watching the first clash. One knight, overconfident, leans too far. The other's lance glances off plate, punches through the armpit gap. The crowd cheers, Bloodsport sells tickets, but you freeze, knowing precisely where that lance entered. Axillary artery territory. Seconds later, your fears prove right. The knight slumps, spurting bright arterial red. You sprint with stretcher crew. Back in the tent, chaos goes operatic. Wine? Yes, but this time poured straight into a gaping tunnel of flesh to sluice away clots. Pressure bandage, tourniquet, clamps, wooden tongs heated and dipped in wine to sear tissue. You kneel on the patient's other arm, weight pinning him, while the surgeon ties off the artery with catgut soaked in, you guessed it, boiling Merlot. The smell is unforgettable, sweet fruit layered over cooked meat. Somehow, the bleeding stops. The surgeon sits back, sweat trickling, murmuring gratitude to St. Luke. You don't breathe until the night moans, proof of life. Dusk again. You're numb with fatigue, fingertips wrinkled from constant washing in warm wine. Your pay? Another half-grown purse of coppers plus a skin of middling Bordeaux. You stagger outside, stare at the fiery sky, and realize something else odd. You can't decide whether you now crave wine for comfort or never want to taste it again. Either way, tomorrow you'll be back, stirring the next pot, because for medieval medicine, there is no such thing as good night and good luck, only keep pouring, keep hoping. Imagine it's barely dawn again. and the bells over the tourney field are chiming the slow, uncertain rhythm of an unplanned funeral. The night air hasn't even decided whether to stay cool or submit to July's furnace. Yet you're already back in the infirmary tent, restoking last evening's brazier. Only this time, the surgeon stops you with a flat-handed gesture. "No more wine," he mutters, nose wrinkling. "Different hazard today." Hazard? Singular? He means plural, you discover, as you push aside the canvas flap and confront a queue of men-at-arms who aren't nursing fresh bruises. They're clutching their throats, sweating through gambesons, though sunrise is still pink. Word spreads faster than gossip. Plague has ridden in with the traitors, hidden in cart straw, and crashed the tournament like an invited noble who forgot to bathe. Before we dive headlong into the stench and superstition, quick pause. Smash that like button if your curiosity about medieval disaster medicine hasn't killed you yet, and drop a comment telling me what time zone you're hiding in while we crawl through this history. Your support keeps these late-night rambles alive, and yes, even in the 14th century, engagement mattered, though back then they called it indulgences and confession booths. Now, back under the tent, the surgeon rummages in a wooden coffer for the instruments of the new crisis. Out comes a wax-hardened leather beak, stitched in the shape of a goosebill, 2 glass eyepieces fogged from years of breath, and a pouch of violently fragrant herbs: juniper, rosemary, a knob of camphor the size of your thumb. He shoves the mask at you. "You do the rounds," he croaks, already stuffing his own beak with mint and clove until it looks more like an overfed hedgehog than protective gear. You hesitate only long enough to realize everyone else has already backed away, forming a semicircle of moral support from a safe distance. So you comply. Mask over your face, straps tugged so tight you feel your pulse beating beneath the leather. Immediately, the world narrows to 2 glassy circles and a suffocating cloud of kitchen shelf potpourri. The inside reeks of old sweat, rancid beeswax, and the ghosts of 100 prior patients' exhalations. Step 1. Circulation patrol. Mask on, you weave through the makeshift cots. Every inhale drags across dry herbs, delivering a shotgun blast of eucalyptus that does little to hide the tang of fear-laden sweat rising from the bodies below. One man grips your sleeve, eyes bulging. "Saint Rock," he rasps, "did the angel trumpet yet?" You'd reassure him, but the mask garbles your words into quacks, so you squeeze his hand instead. And here's the awful secret of plague masks that the woodcuts don't show: condensation. Within minutes, your breath turns the beak's interior into a clammy greenhouse. Drops collect, slide, and finally drip right onto your lips. A warm, herbal, vaguely metallic saline you can't wipe away. The more you talk or breathe, the wetter it gets, until every inhale tastes like unwashed copper mug left in a spice cellar. Outside the tent, the tournament organizers argue. Cancel the jousts or gamble heaven's wrath? Coins must jingle, so they demand a compromise. A quarantine cordon of perfumed braziers set around the lists. As if a ring of smoldering sage can hold back Yersinia pestis? Inside, you and the surgeon become unwilling pioneers of medieval PPE. He shouts orders through his beak, voice echoing hollow. Below the piece of tag, tie lavender bundles above every doorway. Burn vinegar-soaked straw beneath patient palates. For anyone coughing black flecks, bloodletting at sunrise, then wrap the buboes in onions and egg yolk poultice. You comply, fetching vinegar that smells like it lost an argument with a latrine. As you splash it over straw, the fumes mix with interior mask funk, making your eyes water behind fogged lenses. A bad look in a plague ward. Half the patients cross themselves. One whispers that death's harbinger has arrived. Mid-morning brings the ratters, boys hired to chase rodents away. They fling sackfuls of twitching vermin onto a fire pit outside, and the roasting fur scent sneaks through the tent seams, merging with your herbal fog until your stomach flips. You remember you haven't eaten since a heel of bread 13 hours ago. Blessing and curse, because hunger keeps nausea at bay, but exhaustion dulls your reflexes. Sometime near noon, the surgeon assigns you to herb maintenance. Translation: crawl beneath cots replacing wilted bundles. Down there, the air is thick with foot rot, moldy straw, and the unmistakable sweetness of blood that seeped longer than it should. You jam fresh wormwood under one frame, nearly collide with a rat skull rolling free from beneath a blanket. The skull still has whiskers. You swallow a gag, and the inside of the mask grows slicker. You emerge, dizzy, and the surgeon presses a cup into your hand. Not wine this time, but theriac, a pitch-black syrup rumored to contain opium, viper flesh, and about 100 spices. Sip, he orders, keeps the humors balanced. It tastes like licorice boiled in tar, but it burns a clear channel through your herbal haze, giving you 3 glorious breaths of unclogged air before the condensation reasserts itself. By late afternoon, the sun hammers the canvas roof. Heat collects, and the beak becomes an oven strapped to your face. Every inhale feels shallow, every exhale a sauna burst. You wipe inside the lenses with a rag modeled by earlier attempts, but the fog returns before you even straighten up. You haven't removed the mask in 9 hours. Your cheeks prickle with sweat, chafing against leather. One night squire stumbles in, wheezing, pustules already coloring his neck. The surgeon signals isolation. You and 2 assistants drag the poor soul to a hastily erected side tent. There, the smell intensifies. New canvas, damp earth, and the unmistakable metallic edge of impending mortality. You secure him to the cot with linen strips, not for fear he'll escape, but to prevent him clawing open his own sores. He mumbles deliriously about forgotten debts, kisses the air as though pressing lips to an absent lover's ring. Night falls without ceremony. Torches replace sunlight, their smoke adding yet another flavor of misery inside the beak. You can't tell if the dripping in the mask is sweat or breath or both. Beneath the torchlight, dust motes swirl like sparks, and every patient's shadow stretches into morbid caricature on the fabric walls. The surgeon finally gestures that your shift is over. You stumble outside, unstrap the mask, and the night air hits your face like baptismal water. You gasp, first real, direct breath all day, and nearly collapse from the sudden clarity. But before you can rejoice, the stench still clings. Your nostrils remember vinegar, onion poultices, and the unholy perfume of masked confinement. You find a bucket, dunk the mask, scrub with sand, but nothing erases the ghost odor. It's burrowed into the leather, married to the wax, haunting future wearers. You hang the mask on a peg, dripping, watching moonlight glint on its beak like a mute accusation. Tomorrow, you'll strap it on again.
For now, you trudge to the cook fire where someone ladles thin barley stew. You taste ash, not barley, because your taste buds are still coated in rosemary camphor residue. Around you, men chatter nervously. How close is the nearest monastery? Will relics help? Should they flee before gates are sealed? You slurp the gray soup, too tired to answer.
You collapse on a pallet, but sleep won't come. The mask's inner scent still fills your sinuses, riding every breath like an unwanted hitchhiker. You realize plague masks didn't just protect poorly against disease. They imprisoned the senses, forced the doctor to carry the olfactory record of every patient. For medieval healers, nightmares didn't end with daylight. They clung like damp leather. And that, night owls, is how a single day inside a plague mask could drown you in steam, vinegar, and fear, long before the disease itself had a chance. Still awake? Smash that subscribe button if you're brave enough to follow us into tomorrow, when we test medieval fumigations involving burning arsenic and rosemary in sealed chambers. Drop a comment with the strangest smell you've ever encountered. I promise nothing tops camphor onion rat. You wake before the bell this time, jolted upright by a dream in which the plague doctor mask kept tightening until the beak pierced straight through the back of your skull. The image lingers like a grease stain, but dawn's gray is already seeping through the canvas roof of the sleeping shelter. You swing numb legs off the pallet and discover the soles of your hose glued to straw with yesterday's vinegar runoff. There's no point peeling them off gingerly. You rip, wince, and stuff your feet into boots that still smell of rat smoke and spoiled camphor. Outside, the tourney field that was meant to echo with clashing lances lies abandoned. Lists are draped in black cloth, a gesture as theatrical as it is useless. What spectators remain huddle at the perimeter, whispering rumors about which saint cures swellings fastest. Vendors who once hawked honey cakes now sell sprigs of rue at markup, and a blind harpist plays the misère without charging, as though absolution can be strummed into the dust. Before we haul ourselves deeper into today's aromatic misery, do me a favor. Tap that like button the way a medieval barber taps a vein, and drop a comment about the oddest home remedy you've ever heard. I'm collecting them, mostly for future nightmares. Your clicks keep these midnight pilgrimages funded and my supply of questionable medieval coffee flowing. All right, hoods up, back into the breach. The surgeon summons you by name, or rather by rasping approximation, because his throat is ruined from shouting through leather all day. He looks worse than you feel, having slept in the mask to test continuous exposure. His hair, once gray, now carries streaks of the same yellow onion poultice he rubs over infected buboes. "We're out of carriers," he croaks, meaning healthy aides. "Congratulations, promotion through attrition. You'll accompany him beyond the tourney into the town's northern ward, where plague has wedged itself into every thatched attic." He thrusts a second mask at you, freshly waxed, still damp. The leather is stiffer than yesterday's, the glass lenses slightly wider. Luxurious, if you can call any portable coffin luxurious. You inhale the inside's first bouquet, marjoram, burned myrrh, a hint of stale sweat from whoever tested it last night. You strap in, and instantly your breath shortens to mask rhythm. Inhale herbs, exhale condensation. Repeat until sanity dissolves. For transport, 2 mules wait, their saddlebags loaded with jars. Vinegar, quicklime, goose fat salve, and a new concoction, ground emerald powder mixed with egg white. A bishop swore it repelled death itself. Emeralds, apparently, are holy enough to bankrupt 3 noble families, but not strong enough to keep their owners alive. The surgeon shrugs. If nothing else, it makes expensive vomit. You ride single file through the gates, hooves echoing off shuttered houses. Curtains twitch. Children, thin as candle wicks, point at your beaked silhouettes, then dart inside. One toddler calls you Crow Saint. You wonder if that's a promotion or a curse. First stop, the weaver's quarter, a tangle of looms and dye vats. A guildmaster greets you with a rag over his mouth, leading you to a shack where 3 apprentices lie like discarded dolls. 1 moans, 2 don't. The surgeon gestures, and you kneel to inspect the living boy. Buboes blossom under his arms like purple figs. You slice one open, following yesterday's instructions. Cross, not crescent. And the stench that erupts makes even the mask recoil. Putrid fluid splashes your gloves, soaks into the weave, steams in the cool morning air. The emerald paste is next. You smear glittering green sludge into the wound, half prayer, half experiment. The boy trembles but does not scream. You suspect his voice fled hours ago. Outside, the guildmaster demands prognosis. Through the mask, your words churn into distorted warbles, but the gist, pray, crosses language barriers. You move to the next corpse, check for heartbeat. Nothing. A beetle crawls from his nostril, and you flick it away, but it leaves a glistening trail on the boy's upper lip. The surgeon marks the corpse's forehead with ash, a sign to the ratters. Remove by dusk, burn beyond the river. By midday, heat turns dye vats into cauldrons. Blue fumes of woad blend with reed smoke from constant bonfires. Your mask lenses fog, then streak with condensation until the street melts into watercolor. You pause to wipe them when a scuffle erupts. Townsfolk wrestling a beggar who claims his talisman wards sickness. The crowd screams for him to share or die. He clings to a wooden carving of Saint Sebastian pierced by arrows. The surgeon wades in, beak forward, and the mob recoils. Fear of disease trumps greed for miracles. You haul the beggar behind an alehouse. He sobs, clutching the idol. Upon closer inspection, it's pine, not cedar, barely worth a penny. You pass him a cloth soaked in rose vinegar and tell him to breathe through it. He thanks you in broken French, kisses your glove, leaves a smear of tears and snot you cannot feel, but you know you'll never scrub clean. Late afternoon assignment. Fumigation chamber. A merchant has offered his empty grain warehouse for mass cleansing. The plan, sanctioned by the Civic Council, is simple. Pack the sick inside, seal the doors, then burn juniper, arsenic, and sulfur until the air inside resets the humors. You and the surgeon are to supervise charge and duration. Workers shovel glowing coals into iron braziers. You sprinkle sulfur crystals. They spark sickly green. As smoke rises, the coughing inside shifts to hacking screams. Through cracks in the wall, you glimpse silhouettes thrashing. Your stomach twists. The surgeon times the procedure with a sandglass. 6 minutes feels like 60. When he finally signals to vent, laborers pry shutters. A plume billows out, reeking of brimstone and charred human misery. Half the patients collapse unconscious. The other half plead to leave. You note black streaks under their nostrils. Soot or blood? Probably both. Remove the mask for a moment? Impossible. Smoke swirls everywhere. You drag limp bodies to fresher air. A woman clutches your sleeve, fingernails tearing the linen. Through cracked lips, she begs for water. You fetch a pail from the well, but when you return, she's staring upward, mouth slack, as if finally glimpsing a sky uncoiled from suffering. You close her eyes, the mask's beak bumping her forehead in accidental blessing. Dusk staggers in. Fires along the main street flicker to life. Butcher's hooks now hold nothing but lamps, meat long gone. The surgeon decrees a pause. You sit on an overturned crate, unstrap the mask halfway, just enough to sip thin ale. The first unfiltered breath hits like 2 knives. One of fresh-baked rye from a nearby bakery heroically still open. The other of omnipresent rot. The contrast overwhelms. You retch over the dirt. Nothing comes up. Your stomach is too empty. But the act wrings sweat from every pore. You consider the irony. Plague may not kill you, but the mask might drown you from inside. Night records every smell louder. Torches burn pitch. Vendors roast onions trying to disguise rat meat. Priests swing thuribles of frankincense. And somewhere, a tanner boils urine to soften hides. All of it funnels into your nose even after you reseal the mask. The beak's herbs are now soggy, releasing a fetid herbal stew only marginally preferable to the outside. Final duty. Rat catchers bring a wagon of carcasses to the riverbank. You're tasked to pour quicklime over them. Each shovel scoop hisses as it contacts flesh, releasing steam that carries an odor like boiled coins and burnt feathers. A rat leaps from the pile, mad with fleas, scuttles across your boot, and vanishes into reeds. For a fleeting second, you imagine discarding the mask, diving into the river, letting cold water purge every smell. But you know the river is where half the bodies float. Baptism there equals suicide. On the trudge back to camp, the surgeon stops at a roadside shrine. He removes his mask, kisses a wooden crucifix, then spits. Useless, he mutters, strapping the beak on again. You wonder whether faith died before or after the emerald paste. Back in your tent, you attempt to scrub the mask interior with lye soap. The residue has become varnish, embedding onion, vinegar, smoke, and fear into the pores forever. You resign, hang it beside yesterday's, now stiff and reeking. 2 beaks sway in the lantern draft like twin vultures waiting for your dreams. You collapse onto straw, boots still on, and stare at canvas overhead. Your ears ring with phantom coughs. Your tongue tastes of sulfur. You realize plague masks weren't merely tools.
They were prisons for the senses, portable coffins worn by the living to shepherd the dying. And you, unlucky apprentice, are both jailer and inmate.
Starlight trickles through the rent seams of the triage pavilion, glinting off the thin crust of lime dust that coats your boots like snow from some unholy winter. You haven't slept, not really, just drowsed in fevered snatches, jolting awake every time a donkey brays or a body thuds onto the cart outside. Your tongue feels furred, as if you've been chewing nettle leaves all night, and somewhere in the straw, a flea orchestra tunes up with the enthusiasm of demons at dawn. Before we step back onto plague-torn streets, nudge that thumbs up like you're tapping a friend on the shoulder to whisper ghost stories after curfew. Slide into the comments with your worst travel nightmare. Bonus points if it involves questionable medical advice and a farm animal. And if you're new here, subscribe. It's safer than emerald paste, cheaper than goose fat liniment, and I promise it doesn't smell like roasted rat. Lanterns raised? Good. Follow me. The city has decided that today we cleanse the cathedral. The bishop's orders arrive on a parchment so fresh the ink still bleeds at the edges. Apparently, heaven favors marble floors unsplattered, so we are to purge the nave of contagion before tomorrow's supplication mass. You and the surgeon exchange glances that say the same thing. Marble is easier to scrub than alley mud, but the cathedral's vaulted silence will echo with every cough. Spirits linger where prayer is loudest. You wonder if they'll object to sulfur smoke. First task, disinfect the font. Holy water, it turns out, is no holier than the hands that dip into it. The sexton wheels out a barrel of wine, cheaper than vinegar these days, and together you ladle burgundy into the stone basin. The fumes swirl upward, heady, almost pleasant. For a wild heartbeat, you imagine baptizing yourself in the stuff, emerging as Saint Fermented, patron of exhausted apprentices. But the surgeon is already unrolling parchment diagrams, procedures, doses, timings. The wine is merely step 1. Step 2 is camphor resin mixed with pine tar, boiled until it strings like spider silk. You ladle this into copper censers, light them, and soon blue smoke laces the pillars. Sunbeams pierce rose-glass windows, catching motes of ash, so each shaft looks like a stairway for angels with respiratory problems. The cathedral groans, wooden pews contracting in the sun heat, and your mask's lenses seize with condensation. You wipe them and catch your reflection in the polished reliquary, a crow-beaked phantom framed by stained glass saints who watch with pity or alarm. The real test comes when the penitents arrive. They file in, desperate for absolution, clutching sprigs of lavender or wax tablets scribbled with prayers. The sexton ushers them toward confessionals draped in linen. You stand guard near the transept, tasked with spotting fevers. One by one, they lower their hoods for inspection. A baker's wife reveals cheeks flushed the unhealthy crimson of overripe cherries. The surgeon gently touches her forehead through 2 layers of oiled silk and pronounces her warm as clotted blood. She weeps into his glove, begs to stay. He orders her home. As she shuffles off, you smell the terror seeping through her perfume. Between inspections, you replace herb sachets inside your beak. Thyme, sage, cloves hammered flat with a pestle at dawn. fresh, they almost mask the lingering tannic bite of wine vapor. But soon, sweat and tar reclaim dominance. Each breath seesaws, herbal garden, tannery floor, herbal garden, charnel pit. You lose the thread of time, measuring the day solely by scent oscillations. At midday bell, the bishop himself descends the nave, robes hiked, delicate nose wrinkled. He insists the reliquary of St. Aldhelm, containing supposedly 2 fingers and part of a tongue, be carried outside so pilgrims can pray beneath open sky. You and 3 sacristans lift the gold casket onto a litter. As you pass the threshold, some light strikes the lid, and for an instant the jewels flare, hurling fractured rainbows onto the surgeon's mask. He mutters that relics never catch plague, only the living fools who worship them.
Outside, market stalls reawaken. Crisis or not, bellies grumble. A fishmonger fans flies from eels while reciting the Miserere. A cloth seller boils nettles to dye funeral shrouds, the steam reeking of bitter spinach. Over everything drifts the sharp aroma of new pitch. Coopers are sealing casks for mass burial beyond the city walls. Their hammers ring a rhythm that could be dance music, if not for the drumbeat of death behind it. Luncheon, if it deserves the name, is dried figs soaked in vinegar. You chew inside the mask, each bite releasing sweet acid that fights the stench, briefly. The surgeon shares gossip, a rumor that closing the city gates has birthed black markets in the sewers. Rat catchers ferry letters and contraband beneath the streets, guided by candle stubs and memory. You picture bent figures sloshing through ankle-deep mire, masks dangling from belts, trusting darkness more than herbs. Speaking of darkness, after lunch you descend with a torch into the crypt. Corpses stored for delayed burial threaten to ferment. The cathedral's undertaker, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights, leads you down spiral stairs. The air thickens into congealed breath. Here, masks feel less like precaution and more like fragile lifelines. Rows of coffins line the walls, some nailed shut, others open so relatives could identify the remains before fleeing. One lid lies askew, revealing a young novice whose skin has turned the shimmering bronze of decay, tight as drum leather. Her lips curl in what might have been a smile once. The undertaker whispers that she'd lit the altar candles every dawn. Now her own candle sputters in purgatory. The surgeon nods, records her name in a ledger. You sprinkle her with powdered juniper, then tamp the lid home. Torches gutter as you treat each coffin. Quicklime first, then a dribble of wine, sacramental or otherwise, no one cares, and finally a wax seal over the join. The wax melts, releasing a ribbon of honey scent that battles miasma for a breath or two. It reminds you of some affairs before plague, when beekeepers sold combs soaked in clover honey. The memory hurts more than the stench. Halfway down the last aisle, you hear movement. Not rat scrabble, heavier. You spin, torch raised, expecting thieves. Instead, a cat, skeletal, fur patchy, slinks from behind a bier, eyes glowing in torchlight. It hisses, dashes between coffins, vanishes into a niche. You and the surgeon follow to ensure it carries no fleas. The niche, however, is empty,
save for a single broken mask, beak crushed, herbs spilling like dried blood. The cat is nowhere. You imagine it slipping through cracks you can't see, ferrying plague from corpse to street like a furry courier of doom. Back above ground, evening cloaks the city in lavender twilight. The bishop thanks you with a wafer of unleavened bread and a blessing uttered from 2 paces away. His breath smells of almonds, a sign of fear, some say. But you pocket the wafer. Hunger overrides superstition. Bells toll Compline. The faithful kneel on scrubbed marble, murmuring psalms made hoarse by vigil. Their prayers echo beneath the vaults, weaving with torch hiss and your own ragged breathing into a tapestry of desperate hope. Duty isn't done. There's one more appointment. The midwife's hospice near the East Gate, where plague mothers birth plague children. You dread it. New life means new death in days. The midwife greets you, sleeves rolled, arms speckled with God knows what. She thrusts a bundle at the surgeon, an infant swaddled so tightly it barely moves. No visible buboes, yet. The midwife begs for talismans, miracle powders, anything. You hand her a sachet of lavender and rue. She clutches it to her chest as if it were gold. Inside the birthing room, 3 women labor on straw pallets. One screams a curse at St. Margaret. Another murmurs a lullaby between contractions. The air smells of blood and damp wool, overpowering even your beak's defenses. You assist by holding lanterns, passing scalpels, wiping sweat. When a child emerges blue and limp, the surgeon shakes his head. The mother, too exhausted to wail, merely closes her eyes. You place the infant in a small wooden box the midwife keeps for such moments. Sprinkle a pinch of salt on its brow, a sailor's tradition, said to guide tiny souls across dark seas. Midnight approaches. Your body feels stitched together with sinew soaked in vinegar, ready to snap. Yet tasks pile on. Record deaths, tag houses, update the burials ledger. By torchlight, you scrawl names until letters blur into runes of grief. The last entry reads simply, "Unknown, alley behind fishmonger." You underline it twice. Maybe tomorrow, someone will claim him. On the walk back to camp, you test removing the mask again. Bad idea. The city night exudes a stew of smoke, spoiled cabbage, damp stone, and something sweeter, decay, turning the corner toward fermentation. You reseal the straps, inhale stale herbs, push on. Your tent appears like a mirage. Inside, another apprentice, recruited this morning, sleeps with mask still on, snoring wheezily. You hope he lasts longer than the last 2. You unbuckle your own beak with the reverence of an executioner sheathing his blade. Hang it on a peg. Stare at it. The leather is mottled, cracked at folds. The inside glistens with a film of your own condensed breath and the city's collected sins. You wipe the interior with stale wine, because water is reserved for drinking. The cloth comes away black-green. You realize every mask becomes a diary, each layer of grime a sentence in a story no one will read. Perhaps centuries hence, a curious scholar will find one in a grave, dissect the residue, speak of you in footnotes. You hope they mention the smell, onion, clove, tar, fear, else they'll never grasp the weight. Before collapse, you fish a scrap of paper from your satchel, scribble notes for tonight's audience. If this stench had a color, it would be the bruise of a dying sky. You'll weave it into tomorrow's broadcast if you survive till then. Speaking of which, my faithful nocturnal travelers, if your eyes are still open, salute yourselves. Toss this video a like so the algorithm's plague of obscurity doesn't consume us. Share it with anyone who claims they'd have thrived in medieval times. Then ask if they'd ever tried sleeping with sage, catmint, and their own dread stuffed inches from their face. And comment below, which would terrify you more, the smells inside the mask or the air outside it? The street sleeps like a wounded beast, quiet but never still. Moonlight pools in the wheel ruts, silvering yesterday's filth into something almost beautiful. Your boots slide through it anyway, collecting a paste of ashes, candle wax, and rumors. Somewhere behind shuttered windows, a lute plucks 3 hesitant notes, then silence, as if the musician remembered that joy can be contagious too, and therefore forbidden. Quick housekeeping before we pry open this night. Tap the like button as though you're sealing another seam on your mask. Fast, decisive, oxygen-saving. Drop a comment telling me the worst smell you've ever met in real life, and whether you'd face it again for a pouch of silver. And if you've been watching these grim midnight tours without subscribing, that's like attending every funeral but refusing to sign the guest book. Rectify it now. Keep us both alive in the algorithmic afterlife. All right, lanterns up. Follow the echo of hooves. We've been summoned to the tannery quarter, where the plague has begun to molt its skin. The summons came on a scrap of parchment still damp from the runner's sweat. 3 men collapsed at the vats, it read, 1 still breathing, 2 questionable. The tannery is our city's unintentional perfume factory. Vats of dog urine and fermented oak bark simmer day and night, stripping hair from hides while stripping hope from nostrils. Even at sunrise, the fumes can stagger an ox. Now, past midnight, the air is colder, heavier. The vapors descend as a living fog. You tug your mask tight, adjust the linen stuffed with fennel stalks. The surgeon beside you tests the seal on his lenses. Frost halos his exhale. Remember, he mutters, the miasma here can peel the soul from your teeth. Encouraging as ever, you step inside. Torches sputter along the wall, their flames listing like drunk sailors. Slabs of half-cured leather hang from rafters, dripping brine that patters onto the flagstones like distant rain. In the far corner, 3 forms lie sprawled on boards between vats. Slippery ground tells the story. One man must have slipped on a skin, cracked his skull. The other tried to catch him and caught plague instead. The third, still breathing, barely. He gasps, eyes wide, seeing shapes none of us can. You kneel, hand over his face, feel the heat through your glove. Fever hot enough to warp iron. The surgeon wastes no time. He presses a wad of woad-soaked cloth to the man's chest, murmuring a Latin prayer repurposed as medical protocol. You note the swelling behind the patient's ear, bubo about the size of a quail egg, black at the center, already advanced. The tannery fumes probably accelerated the rot. The plague likes to dance with foul smells, partners in crime. We'll bleed him, the surgeon decides, then cauterize. He looks at you. That means you hold the iron. No ceremony here. You heat the poker in a charcoal brazier kept for leather branding. The glow rises from dull cherry to blistering white, painting the man's ribs like bars of light across a prisoner's cell. He whimpers once. Perhaps he knows what comes next. The surgeon's scalpel opens a thin line along the swollen skin, and out seeps a broth of pus so potent you taste it through your mask. Then your cue. You press the iron down. Skin sizzles, hair crackles. The chamber fills with a sweet, porky odor, the smell of sin offering itself up. Does it help? Hard to say. But the iron's kiss cauterizes the bleeding, maybe sears a few demons along with the flesh. You bind the wound with tarred linen, sprinkle crushed mint, and leave a wax-sealed talisman under his tongue. Part superstition, part desperation. He'll be moved to the quarantine loft above the vats. If he survives until dawn, we'll revisit. If not, the tanners will know which vat can handle a body without ruining the hides. Justice is efficient when supply chains are fragile. Task complete. You step into the yard for air that's only moderately poisonous. Frost has formed on the brim of your hat, tiny daggers, each reflecting torchlight. You scrape them off like dandruff of the underworld. Across the fence, a sedan chair emerges, borne by two sweating porters. A noblewoman leans out, mask of gilded wood, a fashion statement, useless for protection. She waves a kerchief perfumed with civet musk, demanding the surgeon. Her maid has developed a cough, and rumor says our surgeon's treatments include powdered ruby. He sends her on her way with instructions to burn the kerchief first. She departs outraged, trailing fragrance that tries and fails to erase the tannery stench. Back at camp, the new batch of apprentices, you've stopped learning their names until they survive a week, are boiling vinegar to refill cleansing buckets. The steam hits your cheeks, mingles with tannery residue, producing a cocktail so potent you worry it might ignite. You gulp water, tepid and metallic, but at least it's water. Half the wells have been flagged suspect since a corpse surfaced in the bucket at St. Mildred's convent yesterday. The surgeon paces, compiling tonight's ledger. 6 new burials, 2 recoveries, miraculous, he writes, though he privately credits youth and luck. 1 noble request denied. He pins the note to the City Watch gate before curfew. You accompany him, lanterns swinging over cobbles slick with frost. Somewhere a rooster crows, confused by torchlight, or announcing death as dawn's substitute. On the return journey, a commotion. A beggar has collapsed near the apothecary row, convulsing. Nearby citizens form a ring, drawn by morbid gravity, but repelled by fear. The beggar's clothing is ragged, but his hands bear ink stains, perhaps a failed scribe. You kneel, lift his head. He stares past you, whispering a name. Isolde. His breath reeks of pennyroyal, an herb for fevers, toxic in excess. Maybe he tried self-treatment. You pry open his jaw, tongue swollen, blue. Not plague this time, but poisoning. The surgeon fishes in his satchel for ground charcoal, a universal remedy. You mix it with water from your flask, trickle it past the man's lips. Some dribbles out. You massage his throat until he swallows reflexively. Within minutes, the convulsions ease. He sleeps. You mark his wrist with charcoal, a symbol meaning detox, watch. Then instruct 2 bystanders to carry him to the hospice. They hesitate. You promise them each a token of safe conduct signed by the bishop. Flimsy paper shields, but fear bests logic. You know by now we drift from plague to plague, the disease, the panic, the cure, the quackery. Speaking of quackery, masks again. New decree. All market vendors must wear beaks stuffed with juniper and rose petals on pain of fine. Result? A run on roses, prices quintuple overnight, while juniper sellers rejoice like gamblers on a winning streak. Somewhere a perfumer brews counterfeit rosewater from beet pulp and violet chalk. You can already smell tomorrow's headaches. Later, crouched by the brazier, you attempt your nightly ritual, cleaning the inner lining of your mask with a rag soaked in spirits. Tonight's rag is formerly the sleeve of a jester's tunic, bright diamond patches dulled by sweat. You peer into the beak, brown crust at the curve, flecks of herb stems, a tiny beetle carcass. You scrape the residue into a pewter bowl. It looks like the sediment of a wicked dream. Then you sprinkle it on the coals. It crackles, releasing a ghost of every odor endured today. Tar, blood, mint, pig bristle, civet musk, and that indescribable something from the crypt. The smoke coils ceilingward, as if to file complaints with heaven. Exhaustion hits you sideways. You crave sleep, but dread the scent trapped in your nostrils, afraid it will follow you into dreams. You settle on the ground roll, canvas stiff with old disinfectant, and tuck your mask beneath your head like a cursed pillow. Eyes closed, you try to recall a clean smell. Maybe rain on limestone before plague days, or your mother's bread crust still warm. But the only scent memory that comes is beeswax and fresh parchment, library air. It calms you, and you drift. Not for long. A bell clangs, 2 strokes. Emergency code, fire. You bolt upright, yank the mask on instinct, dash outside. Flames lick the eaves of the spice merchant's warehouse 3 streets over. Sparks rise, carried by the chill wind toward thatched roofs. If fire spreads, smoke will herd the sick into streets, accelerate contagion. Bucket lines form instantly. Anyone healthy enough joins, passing brine from the tanning pits, ironically useful now. You seize a bucket, feel the brine bite your gloves. You hurl it at the fire's edge, the steam blasting your mask's lenses opaque. You wipe, see silhouettes dancing inside orange glow. Human or demon, hard to tell. Hours pass in a fever of motion. Finally, the flames subside, leaving scorched beams and melted spices. The air reeks of cloves charred to bitterness. Good news, smoke might temporarily cleanse airborne miasma. Bad news, those who inhaled pepper ash will cough for days, each cough a seed for panic. You note this in your mental ledger. There will be new orders at dawn. Speaking of dawn, first light smears the horizon with bruised rose. The surgeon finds you leaning against a barrel, mask askew, eyes gritty. "Get a breath of fresh air," he says. You laugh, a dry bark, because there is no fresh air, only layers of decay wearing different perfumes. Still, you climb the ladder to the rooftop for a vantage over the waking city. From here, the skyline resembles a patient's chest x-rayed by sunrise. Spires like ribs, chimneys like veins, smoke drifting like fever dreams. Somewhere a choir rehearses matins. Their voices drift up, pure despite everything, threads of gold against ash. Below, you see the tannery workers already stirring. They tap the vat's crusted edges, testing temperature. Life persists, stubborn as nettles between flagstones. The mask's smell, after all these hours, has become oddly intimate, friendlier than the world outside it. You wonder if, when this ends, you'll miss it, the shield of stink between you and raw existence. Maybe, or maybe you'll bury it under lime and never look back. For now, though, another night survived means another story to tell. And you, still awake on the other side of the screen, deserve applause. Smash that like button harder than we smashed the fire. Share this episode with someone who claims medieval life was simpler. See how long they last scrubbing plague wax from their nostrils. And in the comments, vote. Would you rather face the tannery fumes maskless for 1 hour, or sleep at the crypt with half-sealed coffins for 1 night? The cobbles glisten with a skin of frost, so thin it whispers under your boots, like parchment crumpling in a restless scholar's fist. Dawn hasn't decided whether to arrive or quit entirely, leaving the sky a gray bruise. Perfect hour to lift a well lid and peek at what nightmares have been steeping overnight. Before we grip the rope and nosedive into the city's throat, do the civilized thing. Jab the like button the way a rat catcher prods a sewer grate. Quick, decisive, no regrets. Scribble in the comments the strangest place you've ever tasted your own fear. Bonus points if it involved water you weren't sure was water. And if you're watching anonymously, hovering like a ghost at the edge of torchlight, hit subscribe so the algorithm remembers your name when all flesh is dust. Right, lanterns down, masks on. The wells are calling. You reach the courtyard of St. Agnes's Hospice just as the bell of second watch quivers into silence. The well cap here is iron, riveted decades ago after rumors that thieves were filching holy water for love potions. Tonight, the chain's padlock hangs open, key still in it, someone in a hurry or someone who never meant to come back. The surgeon flips the key through gloved fingers, muttering that water samples have been vanishing from infirmary jars. Patients improving, then crashing again, fevers spiking like candle flames touched to brandy. If plague spores found a breeding pond in the well shafts, the city's veins are already poisoned. You crank the windlass. The bucket descends, rope sighing through the pulley. About 30 feet down, it splashes. You wait, 3 breaths, then haul. Cold weight rises, sloshing, carrying the smell of limestone and something metallic, like pennies sucked clean. When the bucket clears the rim, lamplight rasps across its surface. The water is clouded, gray, swirling with filaments that jitter when the bucket trembles. Could be ash, could be something worse. The surgeon dips a glass vial, corks it. "To the alchemist," he says, but you're already frowning at the rim. A scrap of waxed linen floats there, the kind used to wrap charnel bundles. You fish it out with tweezers and unravel it. Inside, a sprig of rosemary bound to a pinch of quicklime. A folk charm, often tossed into wells to purify water. But add too much quicklime and you scald the throat from the inside. Someone's been dosing the well with optimism and ignorance. Sudden clang behind you. One of the novices drops her lantern. Oil spatters, flame skitters across frosted stone. You stomp it out before it can lick the rope. Her eyes are huge above her mask. She points toward the cloister arch where a robed figure just slipped away, sandal slapping stone. You give chase, cloak snapping your calves.
The figure darts through a herb garden, crushing thyme, into a scriptoria wing under renovation. Boards creak, dust motes billow. You corner him against stacked planks. Hood falls. Brother Matthew, hospice scribe, eyes shot red, breath sour with fennel. He grips a satchel, bulging glass bottles. You wrest it free. Inside, half-empty vials of camphor, quicklime, brimstone flakes. "I was saving them," he insists. "Holy fire in water burns the devil out." Madness born of grief. He lost 3 patients in 2 nights. Good intentions poisoning the city. The surgeon arranges for him to be confined, kindly with scripture and broth. Ignorance is contagious, but curable, maybe. By mid-morning, you stand before the city council, masks removed at their haughty insistence, though perfumed pomanders dangle from each alderman's neck like gilded onions. You present the evidence. Contaminated wells, folk charms backfiring, risk of lime-burned throats mimicking plague buboes. They murmur, scribble, fret about commerce. One proposes sealing every well and selling barrels of imported river water, profit in panic. You remind them barrels breed rats, and rats prefer enclosed ships and storerooms. Silence follows. Finally, they authorize inspections at every parish well and task the watch to confiscate purification bundles. Small victory, but victory smells nice, even through residual mask musk. Lunch is hard biscuit dipped in vinegared wine, the taste like chewing gravel through a wet handkerchief. You barely swallow before a runner summons you to the Potter's District. A kiln explosion, 3 injured. You find them sitting in the slush, soot-painted, blinking like owls. Not plague, thank mercy, just cracked ribs, steam burns. Still, you cleanse wounds with garlic-steeped alcohol until they beg for brandy instead. You oblige. Brandy disinfects spirits too. As you bind the last bandage, a potter presses a gift into your glove, a tiny glazed whistle shaped like a nightjar. For luck, he says. You recall folk tales. Blow a nightjar whistle at dusk, and no ghost will cross your path. You slip it into your belt. Given our bedtime stock of apparitions, can't hurt. Twilight drapes the roofs in violet wool. Snow begins, dry as sifted flour, settling on charred timbers left from last night's spice house fire. Smoke and snow twirl, courting above chimneys. You head toward the river gate. Reports say bodies drifted against the pilings at low tide. The watch retrieved 2, a merchant and his clerk, throats purpled not by rope, but by something around the neck, perhaps Garrett's. Did plague kill them after all? You examine the skin. No buboes, no telltale rash, but bruises ring the larynx. Murder hiding behind epidemic fear. You jot notes. Criminal opportunists, or desperate families stealing quarantine passes. Epidemic makes everyone an entrepreneur of doom. The bodies go to the charnel ground. The investigation goes nowhere. Evidence burns with the rest. Walking back, snow thickens, mirroring ash from unseen fires. Your mask feels heavier, as if each flake adds its memory of winter burials. You remember part of a lullaby your grandmother hummed, something about snow covering sins, so the angels won't slip on sorrow. You hum it behind the beak. It echoes like wind in a bottle. Night round begins at the Red Widow Tavern, commandeered weeks ago as auxiliary ward. Upstairs, former gambling loft now shelters fever cases. You ascend narrow steps sticky with spilled ale ghosts. Inside, straw mattresses crowd the planks. Lanterns draped in red cloth soften the horror, but paint every face sanguine. Healthy illusions if you squint. A boy coughs against your knee. You adjust his blanket, slide an oak apple charm under his pillow. Another superstition, but sometimes belief beats laudanum. At cot 19, you meet an old acquaintance. The beggar scribe Isolde's lover called for on the street. He survived charcoal purge, but now sweats rivers. You replace his compress, note clarity in his eyes. "Isolde?" he whispers. You shake your head. You never found her. He nods, resigned. "Then write this," he says, and dictates lines of verse, something about inkwings carrying words beyond plague. You scribble on scrap parchment. He sighs, satisfied, and sleeps. You tuck the poem in his sleeve. Inkwings indeed. Past midnight, a nun in plain habit beckons from staircase. She carries a parcel swaddled in waxcloth. Outside, under snow-hushing sky, she unwraps it. 3 beak masks, crudely carved, stuffed with wormwood, heavy with moisture. "Children were playing plague doctor," she explains. "One fell ill. They fear the masks cursed." She asks you to burn them. You set them atop a brazier. Wormwood flares blue, releasing a scent sharp enough to cut memories. The carved beaks blacken, collapses inward. Little prophetic fossils. You pray the children recover. Wind shifts from north, blowing charnel smoke across the river. Air tastes of cinnamon. Someone burned merchant spoil to mask death reek. You pull your collar high, but the smell snakes in anyway. Fatigue nests behind your eyes. Every blink is a shutter banging in storm. You consider a nip of poppy tincture, just enough to mute the pounding skull. You decide against. Clarity is scarce tonight. The surgeon meets you at the cathedral close, news etched into his posture. "It's in the cathedral well, too," he says. "Gray water, lime traces. Worse, leeches. Apothecary found leech fragments in patient vomit. Someone breeding medicinal leeches in sacred water, sold at premium as holy purgers." You picture the worms sliding past stained glass reflections, blind but hungry. Another profit scheme. We take torches down the crypt stairs, breath blooming frost halos. The well stands in a nook between tombs, cover ajar. Rope slick with slime. Bucket returns half full of writhing black ribbons. The surgeon curses in Greek. We dump them into a jar, evidence, and recover the well with chains, seal it with bishop's wax seal. Tomorrow, proclamation. Cathedral services suspended, water blessed elsewhere. Expect riots. Above ground, choir practice echoes. Hollow without well water for voice rinsing. You imagine notes coated in leech slime. Music as quarantine casualty. You jot that in lank journal. Plague measures measured in lost hymns. Near dawn, you patrol the eastern hospice. Snow quits. Stars flicker like dying coals. In an alley, 2 watchers kneel beside a girl curled in trash. You approach. She's breathing, but shallow. Under cloak, you find messenger's badge, Pigeon Courier Division. Their pigeons grounded, the birds dying mysteriously.
Couriers now run on foot through snow, lungs scalding. She collapsed mid-route. You splint her ankle, give water, boiled, cooled, safe. She presses a rolled parchment into your hand. Deliver, she rasps. Addressed to council of barbers and surgeons. You nod. Another errand carved into your night.
The surgeon appears, lifts her easily. As he carries her to the ward, you whistle. Without thinking, the nightjar whistle gift. The note trills, high and thin. An owl hoots in reply. Perhaps ghosts step aside, hard to prove, but streets feel wider for a heartbeat. At last, you find yourself back at the attic dormitory above tannery steam. You scrape Mask's interior again. Tonight's residue smells of wormwood, smoke, well, slime, and faint cinnamon. You could catalog history by Mask sediments, daybook of stinks. Maybe someday scholars will study them, distill a timeline of terror. You unbuckle straps. Let the beak rest on windowsill where dawn's blue seep coaxes it to silhouette. Outside, bells for prime shiver the frosted shingles. Inside, novices snore soft, clutching talismans. You sit, pulling boots without untie, too tired, and lean against beam. One more duty. Speak to the invisible audience still perched beside you. You clear a throat hoarse from vinegar air. Friend, you whisper, we're alive again. If that earns your applause, then press the like it's a hot iron on plague flesh. Share this tale with anyone who swears they'd thrive in simpler times. Ask them how they'd fancy leech water and lime-kissed throats. And jot below, would you toss a charm in the well if it promised safety, even if it poisoned your neighbor? Sunlight spiders through cracks, lighting motes that drift like the ghosts we outran. The city stirs, wounded beast but breathing. Your eyelids sag. Maybe an hour's sleep before next bell. But first, you promise, type continue, and tomorrow night we follow the leeches upstream, inside the apothecary's guild, where remedies rot into rackets, and plague learns to counterfeit hope. Until then, scent your dreams with rosemary, sow sesame seeds into your pillow seams, and remember, sometimes the air inside the mask, foul as it is still the cleanest breath you'll get. A muffled clang below, someone opening the tannery vats. Time, as always, to pretend rest is optional. You pocket the nightjar whistle and descend the ladder, stepping once more into the stink that keeps the city and this story alive.